On to our main set, and now that Chris and I have kind of kicked around some problems we've had on the race course, we're going to walk through the 8 things that our team thinks are the most common problems athletes experience when they're on the run portion of a triathlon. And Coach Chris, as a guy who's been there, done that, coached there, coached that, he's just going to walk us through what should we do when we encounter one of these problems on race day. And common run problem number 1, Coach Chris, is at some point during the run, you begin to feel pain. This can be tweaking a muscle. This can be having just a side stitch that won't go away. This can be some joint pain coming in, some foot pain coming in. It can be having a blister like me. It can be having a torn meniscus like you. But if we're running on race day, we're in pain, what do we do?
Yeah, I think I like to say ABC. Assess the injury. Is it something that is major or is it something that's minor? And if there is any sign that this is progressively getting worse as you're moving along, that's a sign that it might be, hey, you got to pull the plug and go to an aid station, go see a medical professional, have them assess for you if you're not sure, and decide whether you do want to continue or not. And usually the barometer is if it's something that just feels like a little bit of a nagging pain and you might be okay to go through with it, you might be fine. But if there's a sign that it's getting progressively worse, a small muscle cramp versus an actual like breaking of a bone. I've had a few athletes over the years who have actually tripped on a curb and my wife actually broke her toe on a swim, not on a run. I've had athletes break.
Is it like entering the swim, exiting the swim? How did that happen?
Yeah, my wife cracked her toe on a rock going into the swim at one race. But I've had an athlete at Ironman Arizona that took a bad step on a curb and actually broke their foot, and they didn't know it at the time, and they just kept going with it. And so, obviously in that situation, the goal should be shut it down. The race is done. But if it's something that is minor, you want to start saying, okay, now how do I deal with it? So after you assess it, focus on just your effort level, focus on breathing. So I say ABC, A, assess, B, breathe, because oftentimes aches and pains and cramps, whether it's a muscle issue, whether it's a hydration issue, something else, they get exacerbated if your effort level is too high or if you're just not getting enough energy out of your body. And sometimes taking a breath, like taking a deep breath, focusing on your breathing can help get you out of those situations where, you're helping your body get the fuel that it needs to, deal with what you're dealing with. So, B, just take some deep breaths. If it's a side stitch cramp, that's actually a great way to get rid of the side stitch cramp is to do hard, big exhales, big inhales. And it'll slowly go away, but you do have to drop your pace down too. So C is actually check your heart rate. So check your breathing and then check your heart rate and just say, hey, am I going on the plan that I set for myself, or is my heart rate running too high? Because if you're dealing with an injury and you're going at too high of intensity, that's going to be a recipe for disaster. So, check your heart rate and then start slowing things down and see how that pain is still going. Is it getting worse? Is it staying the same? Is it maybe alleviating a little bit? And usually by adjusting that pace, if the pain is getting less, that's a sign that, hey, maybe this is a manageable thing on race day. Because depending on what type of running event you're doing, if it's a full Ironman, for example, that can be a long run. And, you want to make sure that you deal with anything early before it starts getting progressively worse.
Yeah, I can imagine too. Like I like what the injury is probably plays a role as well. I think to Elizabeth James, frequent podcast host on the Triathlon team. She now is a professional triathlete in the professional field. And before that, when she was just an amateur, just to show you how much faster the pros are than the rest of us, she won Tri-Waco at the Olympic distance. She broke her wrist during the bike. Taking a corner, fell, broke her wrist upon landing, finished the bike portion of the race, finished the run portion of the race, overall female champion at Tri-Waco Olympic that particular year. For her, a wrist, it hurt. I'm sure that was not fun to run with that, but it wasn't like if she had broken ankle. the assessment breaking an ankle is probably like, yeah, I can't run. This is not a good idea. But with a wrist, something that's not going to bear your weight the rest of the run, she's able to continue. So yeah, Chris, it's assessing what is the injury. I would not have thought of your step 2. Just okay, breathe, get your heart rate in check, make sure that that's good to go. Before deciding what to do from there. So lots of good stuff there, Chris, from you. Common run problem number 2. This one I think is extremely common to our age groupers. I wanted to put it early in the show because of that. This is where an athlete begins to struggle holding their goal pace for no big reason other than just good old-fashioned fatigue, right? So you have a goal pace. You have the pace your RaceX told you should be able to hold for your run, or you have a certain time in mind where, okay, I want to try to hold this pace for the run. You're clocking along, you're doing good, and then just all of a sudden you're just starting to fade, starting to slow down, heart rate's creeping up, and there's not an injury, you're not dehydrated, there's no tangible reason. Chris, if we see that goal slipping away and we're struggling to hold the pace that we feel like we should be able to hold, what do we do?
Yeah, it's tough. And, you can do as much planning as you can. And especially if you're using, I always say use a smart tool, like TriDot for, a shameless plug, but it matters to not just have a pace plan based on your pace, but have a pace plan based on your environment, the conditions, and to have at least one eye on your heart rate as well. Like I would even say focus on heart rate over pace. And so if the pace is slowing down for some reason, as long as your heart rate is where it needs to be, you're okay. You're adapting for the environmental conditions. Maybe it's a little more humid than was forecast. Maybe the heat just came up a lot higher than what was forecasted, even by RaceX that gets the weather forecast and, kind of adapts for it. So you always, as an athlete, you need to be ready to adapt. And so you can look at a couple different things. Like one, obviously, just start backing off and do the same thing. Like assess where you're at. I always focus on that B of breathing, because oftentimes when someone fatigues, that fatigue and accelerates because you're not getting enough energy. And whether that's you didn't take in enough fuel, or, which is often the case, when people get tired, their breathing goes down and they stop breathing in as much oxygen. And, I focus a lot on metabolic testing and VO2 max and stuff like that, and geek out on all that. And a lot of that you learn when you do stuff like that, that oxygen is one of the most primary fuel sources for your body. And if you can get more oxygen into your system, you can get more energy out of your body, right? You oxidize your fat stores for more energy. And the longer in distance, like Ironman especially, that fuel source becomes much more important. So just breathing is one of the most important things. Sometimes when I cheer my athletes on at races, I'll actually hold up a sign and I'll yell at them and I'll say, just breathe, to get them to remind themselves to breathe deeper, like get more oxygen in. I use the analogy of a campfire. If you fan the flame, it's going to burn more. And so if it's just a fatigue thing, you can oftentimes kind of biohack your body a little bit into actually getting more energy out of your body by just focusing on your breathing. Establish that breathing, work on that respiration first. Oftentimes that can help you get out of a bad spot, whether it's your mood or whatnot. But the other thing, which is sometimes on course, sometimes it isn't, is caffeine. Take advantage of any little caffeine boost. So sometimes if the pace is just dropping down, maybe you didn't get enough energy in, but maybe more calories isn't the solution, but just that extra little kick, that extra little bump can help. But if you do start using caffeine, continue to use it, because if it's a long event and you kind of come off that caffeine high, the crash can sometimes be worse on the other side. Like I've had actually at least 2 Ironman races where I got so tired on the run, I'm like, I can't continue. And I actually sat down on a park bench and took a mini nap for a couple minutes, and then picked myself back up again once I felt like, okay, maybe I just need to focus on my breathing. Maybe I just need to get to that next aid station, get a little caffeine boost, and then was able to continue on. But I needed those couple of minutes just to reassess where I was, have a clear head, because sometimes if you're dehydrated or you have low blood sugar, you're not thinking straight. And so breathing is oftentimes that first step to kind of get you out of that funk.
This is episode 297 of the Try podcast, and I have never heard a coach or an athlete say that during the course of an Ironman they laid down and took a nap on a park bench. Chris, I'm just curious, what race was that you did that?
So I've done that at two so far. One was Ironman Arizona, and it's right before the hill, if you know the hill on the back side of the far side of the
I
course.
sure do.
I found a little dark spot. It was still I was trying to be not doing anything that would be high risk. So I was on a park bench that was right along the run course, so people could see me. If somehow I passed out or whatever, somebody was there. And then at Ironman, it was when Des Moines had a full Ironman. It was a very hot condition day. It was actually the same race that I was power walking the run, and the run, because I couldn't run the run. I had to walk the run. I was wearing a knee brace and everything with the meniscus issue I had. I was just out there for so long, and it was a very, very hot day, and I just got in that dark spot, late in the race. It was probably mile 18, mile 20, something like that, the marathon. And I'm like, you know what? I got plenty of time. I can afford to just sit down for a little bit, kind of regain my composure. And that little 5-minute nap helped, and I was able to continue on. But I would say if you ever feel that way, like first and foremost, don't go off into the bushes somewhere. Find a place where other people are around you and can help you in case it's something else that's at play.
Yeah, and really, what that it's almost a comical like version of it, right? It's the extreme side of this, but it gave you a chance to reset, right? And so for a lot of people listening, okay, in your local sprint, your local Olympic, your half Ironman, okay, you might not be like Chris and find a bench to take a nap. You might, I don't know, but maybe that reset is just walking an aid station. Giving yourself from where you are now to the next stop sign, and just walking for a minute, re-clearing your head, and just breathing, right? And resetting your head. And so yeah, lots of good stuff here. I'm always on board for anybody who encourages me to take caffeine and more of it. And I'm always down for a nap. So Chris, I really like how this podcast is going so far. Common run problem number 3 is you start fighting muscle cramps. I almost roped this into problem number 1, but to me it's just a little bit different when you're cramping as opposed to feeling an injury-like pain. So if we're feeling cramps on the run, Coach Chris, what do we do?
Yeah, and oftentimes people say, "Oh, just take more sodium." Muscle cramping has to do with electrolytes and whatnot. But that's really only half the picture, if not a third of the picture, typically. Usually muscles cramp not just because of hydration and electrolytes, but oftentimes because they just don't have the glycogen stores, the energy to use. The example I use for running is, if you do the math for a typical runner running a marathon, and you look at how much glycogen your body has stored, and that's, glycogen is the stored sugar, the carbs your body has, whether it's in the muscle tissue, in the blood, or in the liver. And if you add that up, the average person might have somewhere around 1,500 to 2,000 calories in that tank. And for a marathon, if you ran at a high intensity, like around your threshold, a typical kind of hard running pace, and you didn't take in any other fuel, you would bonk and your muscles would run out of glycogen completely at mile 18 and a half. And when people take a little bit of sugar, they might prolong that a little bit further. So usually in a marathon run, it's around that mile 18 to 20 point that you start seeing people having calf cramps and issues that start slowing them down. And usually, and I think we're learning this now with sports science over the last 10 years, the recommendations for how much fuel to take in and how you can get your body to perform better with more in the tank, as long as it's the right balance. You can prolong, pushing a harder pace, but you can also help avoid cramping. And so I always say, make sure that you are looking at it not just from an electrolyte standpoint, but when it comes to getting some carbs in your body, that can help quite a bit with muscle cramps. And I think that oftentimes is overlooked. So it's really 3 different things. It's the electrolytes, it's also the fluid, the liquid, and the carbs. Your body stores, I think it is 3.5 to 4 grams of water, or of water weight with every gram of carbs. So when you're taking carbs in, you need the fluids as well. And with the electrolytes, one of the muscle relaxant electrolytes is magnesium. And oftentimes, a lot of sports products have sodium, chloride, calcium, potassium, but not all of them will always have magnesium. Usually, if it has calcium, it'll also have magnesium because those are usually in a ratio with each other. So look at electrolyte products that have magnesium and calcium as well. So more carbs and more magnesium and calcium. And, whether that's, I like the salt stick chews. Those have a good amount of actually magnesium and calcium in them. But just look at the labels. Look at the labels of the products that you have. And I always have in my little race belt, I have a little pouch of those because I know, like, if I do start cramping, that's going to be my way to get myself out of that situation. Or look at the aid stations and take advantage of some of the products that you'll see on course. So don't think just hydration. Make sure you're getting on top of the carbs as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I hydrate religiously because I grew up in Florida. I live in Texas. Like it's a way of life, right? Like it on a Wednesday with 0 workouts, I'm hydrating properly, right? Like it's just life in the South. And so many people just simplify cramping to electrolytes. It's like, well, it's not that simple because there's plenty of workouts where I probably overdo the electrolytes and still can have some muscle cramping. And so you kind of learn, okay, there's more going on here, right? And the science tells us that. So I'm so glad you brought that knowledge to the podcast, just to remind people, picture it holistically. Picture it as there's a couple levers there that can influence those cramps, and get fuel on board, get electrolytes on board, give yourself a chance to kind of reset and give your muscles the fuel they need, not just the electrolytes they need.
And the other thing I would add too, like this goes a little bit back to the assessment side, but when you have a muscle cramp, oftentimes where you feel that pain is not always the problem area. Like oftentimes it's, a kinetic change through the body, and it's the muscle group or the joint or something above or below that might be tightening up and pulling on something. And you feel the pain in the area that's being pulled, but the root cause is directly above or below that. So like you get a hamstring issue, what you can actually look at doing too, besides the fueling part, is massaging the muscles, try to get the muscles to actually physically relax above and below that point. If you've ever seen like, I think the most notable one in recent years was Christian Blumenfeld, a couple races, like in a T100 race, an Ironman race, his legs would seize up completely on the run or getting off the bike. And he would stop and massage it, and people thought, oh, his race is done. And then he gets right back in and he keeps going. But he just figured out, and he knows his body well, of like where that issue is, and he knew where to address it and be able to continue on. So that's another thing besides the fueling, hydration, electrolytes. Sometimes just addressing and making sure that the kinetic chain, the muscles above and below, wherever you feel that pain, are not the ones that are causing the root cause of the issue in the first place.
Yeah, really good addition there, Chris. Common run problem number 4. We're going from cramping to pooping, kind of, sort of, not really. GI issues, right? There's a variety of ways a GI issue can manifest. Sometimes this is just having an upset stomach that's hindering your performance. Sometimes your stomach can shut down and it just doesn't want to take in anything, but you need to take in something. Sometimes this can be palate fatigue, where you've got a gel in your hand, a bar in your hand, and it's just not appetizing to your body. Sometimes this is what I led with. This can be you got the poops, and you keep visiting the porta potty a little more often than you want to. Chris, if any of these GI issues begin to make themselves realized on race day, what do we do?
Yeah, there's a lot to that. I know GI issues can come out all different ends. But yeah, runner's trots, as we call it, sometimes just the act of jostling your insides around causes things to push through. But sometimes people have medical issues too. So always, like, if this is something that is chronic, like you have something that's happening quite often, make sure you do get it addressed. Sometimes people, if they have, Crohn's disease, some other types of conditions, things that just make their bodies respond differently, whether it's a nutritional thing, that's part of, the journey of figuring out, how to be a healthy person, not just a fit person, but a healthy person overall. So figuring out, how to deal with the GI issues, I think is a common thing. But the when the gut shuts down, it can be hard to figure out, how do you deal with this. Oftentimes it's a fluid balance issue, and like something just went off, like you took in too much water. And that's usually the first thing that I try to look at right away is, what, again, assess, what was the issue. Was this something that's happening, a GI issue that's very late in the race? And, if you're drinking a lot of water and you're not allowing your body to absorb that with carbs and electrolytes, right? Everything in moderation should be the theme when you're doing an extreme event. Um, Make sure you get that addressed. So if you've been taking in a lot of water, sometimes it's just a matter of getting a little bit of electrolytes and a little bit of sugar back in the body, not necessarily getting more water back in the body. And just something to help you restore that fluid balance, because the osmolality of your system is off. But sometimes it can just be, you ate something bad, you digested something bad. I've thrown up at least, I can probably count 3 or 4 Ironman races. I've done about 20 plus Ironman races. And yeah, I've had the issues where I've thrown up after a race. I've had issues where I've thrown up during a race. I've had runner's trots. So depending on what happens, like some races, unfortunately, you can get something from the water, from swimming, in bacteria, something your body's maybe more sensitive to. Some people have allergies to different foods. A lot of things can go wrong. And if you do end up having an issue with things coming up, make sure that you're focusing on establishing that fluid balance again. So carbs and electrolytes, especially, I think is typically the solution. But again, it can vary, and you do have to kind of learn what works for you. If runners trots are the issues, and it's kind of like a chronic thing for you, one of my biggest recommendations is to actually, before the race, try to make sure you get everything out of your system. Look at your pre-race routine, and sometimes just going for a quick jog to kind of force things through before the race starts.
Yeah.
Go take care of that. That oftentimes solves issues completely for people that have that as like a chronic thing. Like, you get nervous, the gut in the morning sometimes is a little bit more fluid than you want it to be.
Earlier than you're used to waking up, and yeah.
Yeah, and if you're trying to like shove food in too quickly and whatnot, like dialing in that morning routine, is really the most important thing. But doing a quick, jog before the event is usually what really does help for a lot of people that tend to have that particular issue.
Yeah, great stuff, Chris. And we've actually already recorded the podcast episode that airs next week, and it's a version of this conversation where it's I think we identified 7 common things that go wrong with an athlete's nutrition, right? So there's some overlap here, right? Because some of the things that can go wrong on the bike can also go wrong on the run. Some of the things that are nutrition related deserve their own day. And so we do kick this around a little bit. And so one story I'll share next week that I'll share quickly now, because you mentioned it. Ironman Waco. I kept having to go to the bathroom, and my stomach was upset. I felt like my legs were there. I wanted to run really strong, but I kept just having my stomach say, nope, you got to walk. Sorry. And after the race, I was debriefing with the team from Precision Fuel and Hydration, who kind of talked me through my fueling plan. And I was going over what I was taking and when, and more or less what they told me was, you were actually taking too much electrolytes, like too much sodium, and your body needed just a little bit of plain water. And so it's like you said, everything in moderation, and hopefully, we have our long workouts, right? And hopefully we're kind of practicing and training how our body responds to different amounts of fluid versus sodium versus this versus that. But then you get on race day, and the conditions are different. The pressures of race day are different. And you'll even see, Chris, the pros sometimes get this wrong, right? Yep. It's their job. They race for a living. They train for a living. And sometimes they'll just misdo that balance, that ratio of taking this to that, to that, to that, and stop and walk at mile 18, mile 9, mile whatever. So if you find yourself with runner's trots, you're in good company. Some of the best in the world have this happen to them too.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not a physical or nutritional thing; it's mental, like just the nervous energy.
Sure.
The nerve gets to you and change how your gut responds. And I think the theme of this podcast is also like how to deal with it, right? So sometimes thinking about like, hey, what are the different things that can help me? And at least over the years of, I've done over 130 triathlons, I've done 40 plus marathons. I've learned a lot of little things. And so I have like usually something to deal with everything in my gear bag, but also in my race belts. I actually run with some good things just for a couple people. If this might work for you, you can experiment. Chewing gum. I keep chewing gum in my race belt. So if my stomach gets upset, sometimes just the act of cleansing your palate and chewing with your mouth gets your
You use
body
like a
to start
minty
to
gum or like a fruity gum or
just a regular kind of plain, standard chewing gum, something more minty probably.
okay.
Also, I've been ginger chews. Ginger can sometimes settle your stomach. So for some folks, ginger works really well. I actually used to put ginger chews in my race belt as like an emergency situation item. Um, and then also like if because I've thrown up at a couple races. What I've done, what I've learned is what tends to work for me, surprisingly, to kind of like get back from those situations. Like you empty out a lot of fluid right away, you end up being dehydrated, and sometimes it's hard to actually get things in. Like you just don't want to eat anything after that. Um, so I do meal replacement shakes, like a Boost and Ensure, like a ready to drink item that you can find at a convenience store. I put those, at least for full Ironmans, in my special needs bags. So if I ever have an issue, at least at in transition, each transition I usually have one, and also in special needs. And so that kind of planning ahead of time is something that I've just learned works for me and is a way that I can deal with those situations if they do happen.
Yeah, and it's so funny, Chris. I love the suggestion of just having some stuff in your race belt, your race pockets, your personal needs bags, if your race has personal needs bags. Um, I literally, like the day before Ironman Waco, my coach and I were talking about like, oh yeah, I should probably throw like some Pepto Bismol or like something. And I've never done a full Ironman just in case my stomach gets upset. And we just never, in all the things you're doing, all the boxes you're checking, right, to get ready for race day, just never went to the convenience store and grabbed a couple things that I might want to throw in there. And so I didn't have that on race day. And sure enough, upset stomach for the first time ever during a race. And yeah, so I was like, man, I should have taken the extra 30 minutes to get
Yeah.
all that ready. But
What works for some people too, and I've seen, because I've also had athletes, that volunteer at special needs, and you see the different things that people put in their bags. My wife likes the chews, the Tums, so like a
yeah,
calcium
yeah, yeah.
chew, and that helps her whenever she gets an upset stomach. That's her solution. So she puts that in her transition bags and in her special needs bags. So finding out what works for you, or if you're not sure yet, just having options is sometimes a good way to plan ahead.
Drink a ton of milk and then go for a hot run and then test what product calms your stomach down. That's what we're saying here, right, Chris?
Something
Common run problem number 5 is you begin to feel chafing, blisters, or hot spots. This can be on your feet. This can be on the skin around your tri kit, especially on longer races or saltwater races. Coach Chris, if you start to really feel some friction somewhere and it's bothering you out on that run course, what do we do?
Yeah, a lot. So usually the painful ones are when you get a lot of your own sweat and salt, dipping into a wound. And so any chafing spot usually happens from, there being a heat, liquid like water or sweat, and salt mixed together. And if there's any open wound, that ends up causing a lot of pain. Usually, if that does happen, almost every race, at least the big ones, they will have medical tent or medical supplies at the aid stations. Just go and see if you can get Vaseline or Aquaphor or one of those products that can act as a barrier. Um, they have it in so many different places. Medical staff on the course sometimes roaming around. Police, if they're blocking an intersection, they might have something in their vehicles. But if it's really bad and you need it addressed right away, yeah, get some type of barrier on it, over it. But be careful, because you don't want to just like pour water and then have a bunch of your salt dipping into a wound. So clean the area if you can, wipe it clean. I usually, and I've been trying to find for the longest time and finally found, I think it's Aquaphor. makes little tiny packets of Aquaphor that are just
They
like,
sure
it's like a
do.
single use, thing. You can buy them in bulk. And I now put those in my run belt. So I always have that on the run just in case, whether I have an issue or somebody else. So,
It sounds like your run
that's
belt always has
a
everything.
lot. Yeah, I have a little bit of everything. So if you ever see me in a race and you have an
Find
issue,
Chris.
9 times out of 10, I'll have a solution for you. Um, but yeah, and then for, I guess this would be more for after the race, but A and D cream. So vitamin A, vitamin D is actually good for helping the skin recover. So if you have that next day, or you get in the shower after a race and you have that real painful, chafing mark, get that baby ointment, vitamin A, vitamin D. The A and D cream is a really good solution for that as a whole. Or, and this is another thing I have in my race belt. I should probably just reach over. I have my race belts back here to do a little show and tell, but is hydrocolloid band-aids. So the blister band-aids. I put them in a Ziploc bag so they're waterproof, and I always have at least 2 of them in my race belt. So if you get that back of the heel chafe, like you mentioned, you can just very quickly put that on and have that barrier, because those are designed to repel moisture out. They're more hydrophobic than other Band-Aids, and they create a water seal barrier essentially. So whether it's during the race or after the race, the hydrocolloid Band-Aids are the way to go. If you're at a convenience store, I know the Band-Aid brand has them always in a silver package. So just look for the silver package at a convenience store if you want to just have those extra items to help out on race day.
Yep. No, all great tips. The other one I'll throw out is our friends at Two Toms, which as a company, our favorite, like every tryout pool school has Two Toms on deck because their wipes are so good for all the swimmers in the pool that are putting fins on and swimming with fins. It's so good, waterproof blister protection. But they actually have a product called Blister Shield, which now I keep packets of in my bag after experiencing that Clash event. As a tennis player, I've been playing a lot of tennis lately, and I've also used their Blister Shield when I've played a couple days in a row and I can feel a hand blister coming on. I'll just give my hand a little wipe and then go play, and no issues whatsoever. So lots of good options there, and yeah, it's so interesting. Like, because there was that like obvious like, oh, I have a blister right now feeling at Clash Daytona, and that story I shared when I did Ironman Waco, my first Ironman. I remember, I think I was at mile 16, 17 on the run, and it was the first time I ever felt like hot spots on my feet. And I'm like, I'm going to get done with this race, and my feet are just going to be torn up. And I got done, and my feet were fine. It was literally just a feeling, right? And it can be so like elusive. So I like what you said earlier, like stop, kind of like equating it to having an injury. Stop, evaluate what's going on with this spot. Is it just something I'm feeling? 'Cause I've been in the sun for a while. Is it my skin actually being rubbed raw, and I should address it? If so, absolutely stop, try to get some help, try to get some items.
Yeah.
Fun fact, Chris, fun fact, A&D cream, tryout coach Matt Bach, who makes appearances on the podcast, uses A&D cream as chapstick. He swears by that. He swears by it. He made us all do it at Ironman Arizona one year. He goes, everybody put some of this on your lips just for fun. And I refused, but he made me do it anyway. Anyway, Chris, what were you going to say?
Oh, no, I was going to say there's a lot of good, anti-chafe products out there. And I think if there's anyone new listening to this podcast too, that's one thing that triathletes learn the hard way, usually with a lot of bike mileage, especially is, figure out what products work as chamois cream. The lubricant makes a big, big difference. So being, prepared ahead of time obviously helps, but, learning how to deal with it on the fly helps as well. And, some races too will have sponges at the aid stations. Like just getting the salt away from a wound can make a big difference as well. And just protecting, getting something over it. Like you could even try plastic bags, like getting a plastic bag, or volunteers will sometimes have latex, like a box of latex gloves at the aid stations. Grab that, rinse it off and put that on top, and just have it between your tri-suit and wherever that chafe is, just to act as a barrier to help avoid more chafing. So get that, that fluid barrier established is usually the key to get rid of the chafing areas.
All good ideas. Common run problem number 6 is you encounter weather conditions that were not expected. This can be it just getting way hotter than you thought, the course being way more exposed to the sun than you thought. This could be high winds kicking up, rain kicking up. I was at 7.3 St. George one year as a spectator, not an athlete, when it started hailing on the athletes that were out there on course. And I was at a coffee shop drinking coffee, watching the hail fall down on all of my athlete friends who were racing that day. But Chris, if we're out there on course, we're running, we're exposed to the elements, and some weather rolls in, what do we do?
Yeah, I think just having the mindset of, how to deal with a situation is always challenging. Sometimes you're not thinking straight when you're a little dehydrated or under
Yeah,
fueled. So
sure.
sometimes make sure assess and get some fluids in you, or get some sugar in you. But also just think about how to deal with different things. So let's talk like extreme cold, for example. There's a lot of creative things that you can do on the fly. I remember one race I did, Beach to Battleship. It was a full Ironman, North Carolina, and the wind picked way up. It was overcast. It started raining. Temperature dropped like crazy, and I had issues that actually started on the bike where my hands got so cold I couldn't grip onto my handlebar anymore. And what ended up saving me, and I actually did this again, I think more recently, it was at Ironman California. It just rained all day. Um,
Yeah.
is I use latex gloves, bike mechanics gloves. In on my bike, I have them, and I actually started putting them in my run gear for wet condition races because there's something that's easy. You can throw it off in the trash, at the start of a run if you don't need it, or later on in the day. But just getting your extremities, so your hands especially, warm does a really good job of getting your body warm again, and just creating a wind barrier for your hands, the part of your body that's moving the most and
Yeah.
getting the most wind cooling effect is probably one of the most important things. So get your extremities from not going numb is always the first and foremost thing. Also on the fly, like sometimes depending on where you're running, you might find a plastic bag, and cyclists know this. If you put a plastic bag down the front of your jersey, it acts as a wind barrier. So if you're doing descents off of mountains, that's how a lot of cyclists will stay warm. They'll put newspaper or something in the front, keep your
Did
torso
not know
warm.
that.
So actually, I did that at a same race, Ironman California. I think I was struggling, and I was with a couple other athletes. One athlete dropped out because of hypothermia, and I had told somebody else I found out after the race that she dropped out, but I had told a few other athletes, like, just grab that plastic bag, shove it down the front of your jersey, and keep your torso warm, and that will help your body warm up as well. So sometimes you can get just really creative with what's on course. But you can also just think about, like, what are other things that you can do to protect yourself from the wind, especially on cold conditions. So anything you can do to add extra wind layers. People put plastic bags in their shoes sometimes. So taking your whole foot out of your running shoe, putting a plastic bag over your foot and putting it back into the shoe. I wouldn't recommend it because it could cause blisters potentially. But if in a pinch, if you're really struggling, learning how to deal with that cold is important. But yeah, I've had races where here in Chicago, we run on the lakefront and we get strong winds off the lake. And I've had runs where I actually run seeking where the direction of the wind is. I changed my running route so I would keep running behind trees and large
Sure.
objects just out of the wind every couple minutes. And running away from the wind, even for a couple minutes, can actually warm you up quite a bit. So while it might be counterintuitive and counterproductive to some degree, you could actually run in the reverse direction, or turn around and run backwards for a couple strides, and that actually can warm you up as well. And then in hot condition races, the other extreme, learn how to deal with the conditions. Obviously, hopefully you've looked at the weather forecast ahead of time, when you're on the run, looking for shady spots on the run course, which you can do the opposite in cold races. Look for running in the sun whenever you
Yeah.
can to stay warm in a
I
cold
have
race.
on a run course before very egregiously not taken a tangent to stay in the
Mhm.
shade on a hot day,
Yep.
right?
Yeah. Sometimes the priority is, you and your body, not the time that you're going to be setting at
Yeah.
the end of the day. If it's a survival mode race, I know we here in Illinois, we had a downstate race that was always in the heat of summer, the Cutting Edge Half Classic down in Effingham, Illinois. And we used to call it the death march, not a run. It was a swim, bike, and a death march because the heat index would always be around 105. One year it was 115 degrees with the heat index, and you're just in survival mode, and it's not about running, it's about power walking, it's about finding
Yeah.
the shade, it's about using the aid stations to cool your body, whether that's just getting more fluids in, dumping water, ice. Sometimes you have the tri suits that have little pockets you can put the ice cubes in. I also encourage the arm sleeves, like the sun sleeves. You can put ice down the front of those, or just pouring water on that, because that will cool your body down as your arms are swinging. You'll get more of a wind effect, to help you stay cool. But yeah, any little tip and trick that you can put together, have that in your mental toolkit, and then also physical toolkit. In some cases, just having those extra items can make a big difference, because yeah, not some triathlons are very standard, but some are intentionally, extreme condition races, and the adventure is figuring out how to deal with those situations.
Yeah, I do want to say too, Chris. You mentioned earlier sometimes on the run course when this weather is kicking up, we're not always in the perfect state of mind. And if you're out there and race officials pull the athletes off the course for some reason, either temporarily as a pause or permanently, race is shut down. Listen to them. Know that they're not doing that without absolutely having to. But here in Texas, 70.3 Galveston, Ironman in the Woodlands. There's been several years where those races have been either paused for 30 minutes or just, hey, everybody's done for lightning, right? Which is a dangerous condition. Yep. So trust the officials that happens. There's been years where those races are paused and then they let everybody back onto the course 20 minutes later. And okay, yeah, like some people might have skirted that and stayed on course. Some people might have cheated the system. Yeah, your timing and your placement might be messed up a little bit, but do your best to listen to the safety, the safety briefings and decisions that are being made by the race director in real time.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
really important. I've had one full Ironman race I was doing where I was on mile 70 of the bike, and the weather looked fine, but all of a sudden the police told us pull over. Everyone's getting off the course. There was a lightning storm on a different part of the course, and we had to just wait for an update. And then eventually they said, okay, they're canceling the race. Everyone has to get bussed back. We're like, why bus back? We have our bikes. We can bike back. And so they gave some athletes the options like, yeah, if you want, you can bike back. You have to turn your chip in, but there is a storm coming. And people are like, I want to get my training miles in. And they just went.
Sure.
And we
pesky
waited,
triathletes.
we waited for the bus, and the bus picked us up. And on the way back, it was the most torrential downpour, like felt like a tornado coming through, hail, you name it. And we were so glad we listened to the officials and took the bus back and we ended up seeing a couple people about 4 hours later that came back, and they got pelted by hail and had to seek shelter somewhere else. So listen to the officials. If they're telling you to stop. There is a reason why.
Yeah. Live to fight another day. Common run problem number 7 is you experience a tech failure of some kind. We talked about this one last week on the bike version of this conversation, but a tech failure on the run course is usually your watch dying in a longer race. It can be your heart rate sensor beginning to malfunction or your run power meter beginning to malfunction. Coach Chris, if there's some tech that we're used to having and we're out on the run course, how do we handle that?
Yeah, I think one common issue we see a lot is, just forgetting to charge stuff and batteries dying. So make sure you have that as part of your plan to juice up things ahead of time. I've done whole YouTube videos on like the little Garmin settings to change to boost the battery life. So if you're worried about that, definitely look into that, and make sure you pack your charger and spare batteries. Now with electronic shifting, especially too, all the time. I've been guilty of that. I was at a ride. I was actually bike marshaling for a local half marathon here, and I was charging one of my batteries, and I forgot to put it back on my bike. And so I rolled out the door, and all of a sudden, like, missing a battery, can't shift my gear. Luckily, I had the SRAM shifting, so I could take the battery from my front derailleur and put it on my rear, and I at least could shift my rear gears on the bike. But that's a bike issue. So I would say, yeah, for tech stuff, obviously the battery thing is usually the main tech issue that people deal with. The other issue, though, we have a lot of endurance athletes who are so dependent on like seeing their heart rate to gauge their pace, and we get so tied to that. And I'm a big tech geek. I love my data. I look at my heart rate powers data all the time, but learning how to pace yourself without that is important, whether it's just for dealing with those situations when things go wrong, or just having a second way to assess things. Because oftentimes, if you have like an optical heart rate on your wrist and all of a sudden the heart rate doesn't look correct, like some devices will have issues like
Yeah.
cadence lock and whatnot, the PPG technology, the optical technology is not as good as an ECG, a chest strap. So for heart rate stuff, what I encourage runners to really focus on is learning how to assess your pace based on your respiratory rate. So if you're not familiar with like asymmetric breathing, is something that I talk a lot about. Is if you run and you count how many steps you take as you breathe out and how many steps you take as you breathe in, you can correlate your breathing rate with your cadence, and that very closely ties to a heart rate zone. So if you're running at a really high intensity, you might be breathing out 2 steps and breathing in 2 steps, like, and that's zone 5 for most people. If you're at a 3-2 breathing rate, like you're exhaling for 3 steps, inhaling for 2, that asymmetric rate, that's usually a zone 4, like a racing zone. And then if you're doing like an Ironman or longer distance, ultra marathon, going down to a 3-3 or a 3-4 asymmetric breathing rate is ideal, because then you can just learn how to deal with the environmental conditions. You can deal with when you get cramps and other issues, you can still gauge your own effort level without needing that heart rate, just in case that heart rate monitor is acting up on you. But I also like that tip because it makes you focus on your breathing. And if you get
Yeah.
more inhaling, you get more oxygen in your system, you're going to get more energy.
Just
So
breathe.
it's a little bit
Just breathe,
of
baby.
a body hack. Yep, just breathe. Because 9 times out of 10, just breathing and getting more oxygen into your system will help you, adjust for cramping, fueling, other issues, but also whenever those tech issues go wrong. And I use it competitively, actually, when I'm in a running event and I'm running next to somebody who I might be competitive with, I listen to their breathing rate. And if I can keep my breathing rate more in check than theirs, then I know I'll have that extra gear later on the run. So competitive athletes can use it as well in some fun ways.
Yeah, good stuff. The other one I've seen that I find very helpful, and I'll share this with runner friends of mine that I don't have a Garmin watch, don't have a heart rate monitor, but they're getting more into it, and they kind of want to know how to gauge their effort. There's videos on YouTube from cycling magazines, running magazines. One in particular that I saw has a cyclist on a indoor bike trainer, and she's out loud reading a book as she's pedaling, and it shows you like how well is she able to talk while pedaling and correlating that to a heart rate zone. So obviously in zone 2, she's able to read the book just fine without it sounding like there's any break in the text. Zone 3, there's a little bit of huffing and puffing, but she's still reading it very effectively. Zone 4, there's quite a bit of breathing in between words. It's taking her a little while longer to finish complete sentences. And then zone 5 and zone 6, she's barely getting anything out at all because of the effort making her run out of breath. And so finding a video like that just to give you a gauge of, okay, I'm out on course. My watch has died. I'm kind of interested in how hard am I pushing? How well can you talk to the people around you? How well can you make a comment to somebody at an aid station or an athlete going by you? Or a spectator going by, are you labored in conversation, or are you easily holding conversation? That's also a really good way I like to self-regulate. Okay, what RP am I at? What zone am I probably in right now? Comment run problem number 8, Chris. Last one for the podcast today. This is an athlete. They're on the run course on race day, and they're just finding it hard to concentrate. Maybe they're starting to feel foggy. Maybe they're hitting a dark patch mentally where they're really finding it difficult to press on. Coach Chris, what do we do when we face a tough moment like this in the run stage of a triathlon?
Yeah, a couple things. So one, obviously, I always go back to that breathing thing. Sometimes, if the breathing is the first domino to fall, that ends up becoming a downward spiral that affects everything else. So always, assess, focus on your breathing, get that started. And then also, the on-course stuff, I think we talked about as well, like getting a caffeine as something to give you a little bit of a boost if you need that extra boost of energy. So those are always the two kind of first things. I also like to have a focus on biomechanics. So if you're having trouble focusing on, what pace you're doing or whatnot, focus on something simple. Focus on your cadence. Sometimes a little hack when your energy is not there and you're having trouble focusing. What I go to is my kind of fallback when I know I'm like, okay, mentally I might not be there 100%, but I can at least have one thing that I can focus on. And I just try to pump my arms with a higher cadence and short arm stride. And what that does is it gets my cadence to increase a little bit, and it gets my legs to go, because the reason your arms swing while you run is because your body is trying to balance itself out, right? Your right foot goes forward, your left arm swings forward, so you're not falling down on that side. And so you can hack your biomechanics by just focusing on, swinging your arms a little bit quicker, and just having something simple like that, a biomechanical thing to focus on, is very helpful. Any type of running form tip, have that in your mental toolkit, and just say, hey, when something else is, you're struggling, and you've tried everything else, you've tried to slow down your pace, you've tried to focus on your breathing, you've tried to get more carbs in, what else is there to do? And sometimes you just need that little thing to focus on, or that distraction, so to speak. The other thing, though, when it's more like, mentally you're down and you're just not feeling great, I often say, give out positive energy, like fake it until you make it. If you see, spectators on the course, if you see, volunteers at the aid stations, say thank you to them or cheer on your fellow competitors. And when you give out a little bit of energy, even if you're feeling down on the inside, just giving that energy out, you get that energy back. And oftentimes that's a little kind of hack you can do to kind of elevate your mood again and give yourself that final boost. So whenever you're struggling out there on the run, just find that way to just dig deep, give a little bit of energy out, and you're going to get that back tenfold. I know one hack, and I think she used to do this on the bike more than the run. Chrissy Wellington, a well-known, pro triathlete, Ironman, undefeated in Ironman distance, legend of the sport. She used to write "smile" with an exclamation point on her water bottle. And she found that every time she would look at that, it would remind her to smile, and that would elevate her mood. And it would also make her competitors think she was like crazy. Like, why is she smiling when she's going really, really hard? So she would play some head games with people too, I think, a little bit. But just reminding yourself to smile. You can write it on your arm like a mantra or something, just to kind of force yourself to remind yourself of, why you're doing this, or that you're enjoying this even when you're struggling.
It's supposed to be fun, right? It's supposed to be fun.
It's supposed to be fun, but we're spoiled to be able to have this be a hobby and a sport that we get to do. So I think it's important to always give back to the volunteers a little bit as well, and spectators that come out to cheer you on, but also use that as a way to encourage others on the course, and you'll find that you'll get that energy back, and you'll get out of those dark spots when you're on the run, especially.
On to the cool down portion of our show, where we ask our coach a question from our audience. And this week's question comes from an athlete named Alan. And Alan wants recommendations for indoor cycling trainers, which could be the best price benefit. There's a lot of ways to play your indoor cycling setup. And this is a run focused podcast, but believe me, Coach Chris Navin is the right guy to answer this question. Chris, what would you advise Alan and other athletes who are just looking for the best kind of price benefit, best per budget, per the price point, whatever it is, indoor cycling setup?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of questions that come with that of like, what are your main
Sure.
training goals?
Yeah.
And if you're doing more interval training or course simulation, or just looking for something super simple. If someone doesn't already have a power meter on their bike, sometimes I'll say, hey, just get a power meter for your bike and a dumb trainer. And that's the simplest option. Or any of the wheel-on trainers, the Wahoo Snap, the Ceres M2, I think it is. Those are very popular wheel-on trainers. Elite also has the Tuo, I believe. Those are real simple ones because it's easy to get your bike on, it's easy to get your bike off. You don't have to deal with taking the wheel off. And those can provide a good enough solution for most people. But if they're looking for a more kind of, spending a little bit more, those are usually around the $200 and under price point now with the sales and whatnot. But with tariffs, who knows? Prices can be all over the place, both high and low. but for smart trainers, you don't need to spend an arm and a leg. Like there are those, $1,000 to $2,000 smart trainers still these days with all the bells and whistles. But there are some that are, for $300, $400, you can get a top, top performing wheel, direct drive trainer rather, that we see most triathletes who get into the sport for a long time wanting to have, just because they're silent, they're more efficient, they provide a little bit of a better experience in course simulation and better power range and inclines and all that. So Wahoo has like the Kicker Core is a really popular one. Jet Black is another brand that has a really, really good, actually pretty fully featured direct drive trainer for around $400. So I would say, look at the features and but also think about what are your priorities, with what, how often you're going to use it and what you're using it for. Some of the simplest solutions for others have actually been just getting like, I have the Feedback Sports Omnium trainer, which is a foldable roller. It's not really a full, trainer, but I just use that with a power meter on my bike. And you can spend a couple $100 on a power meter on your bike, get a portable trainer, and you can take that anywhere. You can put on your back porch. So if you need a versatile or a solution to travel with, sometimes that can actually be a low budget option, but also a very simple option from a setup and versatility standpoint.
Yeah, one that I never thought of, Chris, because I had a power meter on my bike already. And if you have a power meter, yeah, you already have the watt numbers that you're pushing, right? Without investing in a smart trainer. And so, yeah, you can just get a dumb trainer and train just as well as somebody with a $3,000 indoor setup. Watts are watts if they're being read accurately. And then, so if you're going to your point, if you're going to buy one thing, if you're buying the power meter, well, then you also have the power meter outside, and you're benefiting from that data when you're outside. So I do like that solution. I know for me, when I was looking at this, as a first-time purchaser of a smart trainer or of an indoor training setup, I was not interested in dealing with the setup of making the tire connect to the trainer, because you have to do that just right for it to read accurately, and then you're rubbing the tire every single time and you're burning through your tires faster. So to me, it was worth saving up a couple $100 more to get an entry-level wheel-on trainer.
Yep.
This is going to depend differently for everybody, just depending on what you prioritize and what your budget is. But I saved for a little while to get one where I could actually take my wheel off, put my bike directly to the trainer. But that was important to me, to not have the wheel rubbing and have to deal with that every single time in my setup. So yeah, some great options there posed by Coach Chris, and a little more 2 cents put in by me. But these days, thankfully, there's a lot of options, and the price point for some of the good options have come down significantly. One last resource I'll quote is, if you go to Zwift's website, Zwift is very motivated to make it easy for people to ride their bike indoors, because then you're going to sign up for Zwift, hopefully, in their line of thinking. So I just pulled up their website while Chris was talking, and they have so many different products on here at different price points, different ways of connecting your bike to a trainer to make it easy for you to ride indoors. And so that's just a resource.
One thing I was going to add to that too is look at price points as they change quite dramatically now. That Zwift Insider is a great resource that lists all those trainers, but also smartbiketrainers.com, I think it is, a YouTube channel. They do I think their website actually lists all different pricing for different trainers, because some of them, I was going to actually throw out one more, the Ceres H3. Ceres used to charge $1,000 for that trainer. Now it's same exact trainer, under $400. And so a lot of them have just priced differently, whether it's to clear inventory or whatnot with tariffs, who knows? So shop around, because you can find some really, really good options at literally the $400 price point if you're willing to spend that much, where you've got, a pretty much a top of the line trainer, might miss one or two features here and there, but there's some great deals to be had, and that'll make your training so much more effective at the end of the day. So definitely shop around, and ask others too. Join the TriDot chats, join the Circle app, the Facebook groups. People are getting rid of old trainers. People have different options where they might just be looking to clear out their closet. So that's always a good starting point too.